Hello and welcome to episode 147 of MMO Weekly, presented as always by Chitty's Cheesesteaks. I'm Sal Manzo, joined by Matthias Altman Kirasaki. Chris Bello is joining us again tonight, fellas. As we sit tonight, Metsi's got rained out. They play a doubleheader tomorrow. The 17 games under 500, they're last place in the NL East. They stink. They're like 11 games out of a playoff spot. If the Mets were a car dealership, the sales would be hot. And it would be like Memorial Day because they're going to be selling. They're going to be selling hot. They're going to be selling fast by Monday. We're going to get into all of it. But listen, disappointing season. When you're 17 games under 500, this is what happens. So we're going to be talking a lot about who we think the Mets are going to be selling here, what happens with them at the deadline, and obviously just kind of a few bright spots. Very few bright spots happening around for the Mets. We'll talk about Soto's injury as well. Calf thing, running around again here in a lost season for the team, but, annoying thing to deal with again. But we'll start with the deadline here, guys. Obviously, Monday we know is the day. We expect every Met that's on an expiring contract, for the most part, to not be here. Could be a couple of other guys that, could be out of here as well if they command some sort of any of a package. And, like I said, when you're at this point in the season where the Mets are, you have to kind of entertain every offer that comes your way, right? When you're this bad and, depending on how the trade deadline goes, maybe there's a certain player that, teams want, they get a little more for it, but not what I thought the Mets would be doing at the trade deadline when we talked in March. But here we are. They're just a bad baseball team, and it's time to sell off some assets for other teams that'll be going for pennant pushes. So, Matthias, why don't we start with you? Just your thoughts overall before we kind of dive in specifically to some players, but just your thoughts on this deadline, as a whole.
I mean, yeah, it's going to be – I'd say it's kind of like the 2023 trade deadline, except I think they actually have slightly better pieces to sell. The tough part with 2023 is that their biggest pieces were Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander, two guys who were on the wrong side of 30 for Verlander, wrong side of 40. So it was sort of a tough sell, even with their pedigree. But going into this deadline, I think there's certain categories here. The guys who I think you trade no matter what, AJ Minter, Brooks Raley, Tyrone Taylor, who has turned into Barry Bonds over the last couple of weeks. Freddie Peralta, and then there are a couple guys where Luis Robert, I guess, is technically a rental because you can turn down his player option, his $20 million player option if you really think so. And then there's Sean Manaea, where it's like he's pitched well enough, I think, over the last couple months where a contending team could use a back end starter like him. And then there are the guys who I would only trade if you get a good enough return. Luke Weaver fits this because he's under club control for next year. Clay Holmes, if you're not going to extend him, fine, trade him because he's almost certainly declining his player option. Jared Young, a guy who has done well enough, but is an older guy. He's over 30, where you think about moving him. Like, all right, that's a guy. I'm sure some team would need a first baseman like him. And then you have the two catchers. Shea Langeliers is out for the year. He was probably the best catcher on the trade market, if he even was on the market. So now these guys, Francisco Alvarez and Luis Torrens, have value, like significant value, I think. They're not trading Alvarez. There's no way they're trading a 24-year-old who can hit pretty well, actually. I know he's a question mark behind the plate, but unless you're getting a really strong trade offer back, I don't see them moving Alvarez. He has club control too. And Luis Torrens, who has one more year of club control, but he's a defensive-minded backup. You'd be surprised at how many teams need someone like that. How many teams need a backup catcher, if you wouldn't believe it. Because he's like a high-quality backup catcher. So there are some clear categories here. And then there's the beg for a taker category, I feel like. That's Mark Vientos, Brett Beatty. I know Vientos is injured, but and Ronnie Mauricio, who's in the minors, and Kodai Senga. I'm not even sure what Kodai Senga's role is anymore. He's been better as a reliever, I'll say that much. And then there's Marcus Semien, who, if you wouldn't believe it, Marcus Semien has an OPS over 900 since returning from the IL. So, I mean, it's clear the direction they're going in, and that's the thing about that weird holding pattern they were in going into that series against the Cubs where they got swept, where they were like 500 for a bit. Or they were 4 games over since May 1st. That was the that's where they were. They were hovering in this 7 to 8 games under 500 range. Now they're 17 under. We all know what they're doing. So it's going to be an interesting trade deadline. And I'm really just curious to see what this roster looks like after Monday and what the farm system will look like.
Yeah, I almost think it's a perfect storm of all of these guys being available to trade, and also where the Mets are right now. You look at what they are. They're, as you mentioned, Sal, they're 17 games under 500. And on top of that, they've got all of these great pieces to move. If they were smart, they would move Clay Holmes. He seems like maybe one of, if not the best starting pitcher on the market, because you don't know what Tarek Skubal's situation is. And you also don't know if Emerson Hancock's also going to get moved from the Mariners. But outside of that, if the Mets don't capitalize on this deadline, it might be a little darker of a future in terms of what the baseball season is going to look like in 2027 and what their roster is going to be in 2028.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's a good point, Chris, right? I think this is, a trade deadline that can kind of show you or, kind of foresee if there is baseball, whatever, what that roster could look like for you. Matthias, to your point, it's going to be a much different look past Monday. I'm curious to see. You talked about kind of those like throwaways or the untouchables, the Beattys, the Vientoses of the world, right? Like, are they still going to be a Met come Monday? Is there a world where, they're out of here? Guys like Ronnie Mauricio, who's playing really well in AAA right now. He seems to be kind of a quadruple A player, but you want to give him a run, right? He's had a few home runs now down in AAA the last couple of games. I'm just curious to see like what young guys come up, who replaces, these kind of veteran players that we assume that they're going to let go of, and who maybe can, I guess, to make it glass half full, who will come up, maybe impress folks for a couple of months to give Met fans a little hope. Someone that can come up that they weren't expecting, maybe that gets a run here now. It could prove they could be valuable for the major league club down the road. It's just interesting. Like you talked about Alvarez. I would, if the right offer came around, I think considering he was a former top prospect in the sport, if you can get something good back, I would be enticed to do. I'd be enticed to trade both catchers. Frankly, I haven't seen Alvarez develop enough behind the plate. That aside, the bat, he's going to run into probably 20 home runs a year, right? If he's healthy. The power is there. It's just you haven't seen him develop into a complete hitter or stay on the field, which is, obviously he's only 24. You mentioned that, Matthias, but that's a concern of mine as well. He can't really stay healthy. And as a catcher, if you stay behind the plate, that only kind of gets worse as you get older. So I don't know. But, it's just I keep going back to the developmental part. How the Mets haven't been able to develop guys like Alvarez, Beatty, Vientos, etc. And now guys that were, and someone like Vientos who had real success. 2024 was a breakout year for the guy. He has 30 home runs, great postseason hitter during the Mets run that they had, and now is essentially a cast-off. So I know we talked about it a bit the last time we were on, but just the failure of the developmental side of the Mets now. And, Stern's been here a couple of years, has had his hands on this team, was praised or, to be kind of someone who develops players. So I guess that's where I keep seeing the fault here, that these guys haven't taken the next step under this regime. And I don't know if it's going to get any better or whatever. It's just, again, the shock to be this bad and to have fallen off this quickly in the season, we've just been expecting this now for 2 months. It's just sad for a team that has a payroll that it has and the expectations.
And that's what makes it hurt. I mean, this was a team that was widely expected to win the NL East, compete for the National League pennant. Granted, the Dodgers are the Dodgers. All right, let's be real. Nobody in the National League is catching the Dodgers. And watching the Phillies and the Braves when they've faced the Mets recently, I'm not really convinced those teams would make it very far in the postseason. Even the Brewers, I'm like, would the Brewers even stand a chance against the Dodgers? But the thing with this whole conundrum with the catchers here is that you have Alvarez, who's the more offensive side of things. You got Torrens, who's obviously a far superior defender, but behind them, they don't really have a major league catcher. Hayden Sanger is like the third string option. Obviously, he's not much of a major leaguer. And then you have, the the catching prospects in the organization. You have Kevin Parada, who's completely flamed out. It seems like he had a hot streak in Syracuse, goes back to Binghamton, can't hit a lick. Christopher Suero at this point is probably not a catcher. I mean, they've been trying him in left field a little bit. They've been DHing him. Long term, probably not a catcher. So they don't really have an answer if they were to try to move on from Alvarez or to move on from Terens. Obviously, Terens is the older player. He only has one extra year of club control because they did give him a 2-year deal. And I think some team would value him. I think he calls a great game behind the plate. He's basically been everything the Mets could have asked for out of him during his time here. But yeah, it's a weird spot. To your point, the player development has not been very smooth. A lot of the upper minors, the guys have taken a step back, admittedly, with the exception of guys like Jonathan Santucci just got moved up. That's nice. So there have been some small victories within the player development, pipeline this year. I mean, Mitch Voigt just got moved up too to Binghamton, but it's a weird spot for the organization. They're not in a spot where you completely blow up the entire roster, trade everyone, but there's a reason why they're going to have to restock this farm system.
Yeah, to touch on the catch too, I actually think there's a chance they Francisco Alvarez than Luis Terens. They just signed Luis Terens multi-year, as you mentioned, Matthias. He's so great behind the plate, and he's also how make a pinch hit and run an extra inning. So I think if they were going to move Luis Terens, it would have already happened. We already know that the White Sox and tried to pry him away from the Mets, and nothing happened there. So Francisco Alvarez is interesting because if they do move him, to me, that says they don't value him as a catcher. And that's where all his value is. If he can hit 25 homers or if he can hit 30 homers and it's behind the plate, then you have one of the best catchers in baseball. But all of a sudden he can't catch. Well, is he a DH? Is he a first baseman? We don't know. So at that point, if they were going to move on from Francisco Alvarez, it says to me that the front office doesn't think that he can catch. But that being said, the Mets with Francisco Alvarez and Tyrone Taylor and Luis Robert Jr., the reason it's so enticing to me that they move all these guys, and Alvarez I'm still 50-50 on, is because the league desperately needs right-handed bats right now. I mean, everybody wants a right-handed bat. You just saw the Curtis Mead and the Connolly early trade with the Red Sox and the Nationals, and if the Mets can get a right-handed bat back that's a prospect, or if they can get a starting pitcher back for one of these right-handed bats, I mean, that would just totally transform the direction of this organization. So with Francisco Alvarez, if they moved him, I was very anti beforehand, but now we've seen the defense start to lag behind. They've already tried sending him down to try and fix his woes, and it hasn't really been not addressed, but it hasn't been fixed yet. So if they were to move him, I think right now would probably be the most opportune time to do it.
And I'll say this much: there's not a lot of catchers available. Like you look at it. Like I said, Langoliers was available. Now he's a torn meniscus, isn't playing the rest of the year. Ryan Jeffers, in theory, is on the trade market, but the Twins apparently think they can be buyers this year. I'm not sure if I agree with that. And I really don't see Hunter Goodman getting traded. So yeah, Alvarez honestly could probably be valued pretty highly by some teams. I don't know how much they like you were saying, Chris. I don't know how much they'd value him as a catcher. Because, I mean, look, there's a reason the Mets have been giving him more DH days. A, they want his bat in the lineup, but B, they trust Terens a lot more behind the dish than they trust Alvarez.
Yeah, the Twins being buyers are hilarious because they're 53 and they're 54, but what a time to be in the American League. They're only one game behind the third wild card, so I kind of get why they'd want to buy when, you got Byron Buxton there and Joe Ryan in that rotation, but yeah, I mean, there aren't a lot of catchers on the market, as you were saying, Matthias. And if the Mets were to move Francisco Alvarez, I bet they'd get a haul back, just not only because of the control, but the power potential.
Yeah, no, I mean, you look at talk about the age of Alvarez and just like the potentially was number one overall prospect in the sport, right? So there would be some team you would think that would want to take a chance on him, change the scenery sort of thing. But I agree with your point, Chris, that if the Mets are looking to move him, and do I necessarily think they're wrong? No, from what I've seen, that they are kind of giving up on Francisco Alvarez, the catcher. I don't think he could do it long term, which as of right now, I don't think they would be wrong in that assumption to what your point. He's been up and down a couple of times in his career now trying to fix defensively. It hasn't really happened. So we'll see. But this is what happens. It just goes back when you're 17 games under 500. I mean, last place in your division and one of the worst records in all of the National League. So this is just kind of where they're at, unfortunately. There's another Francisco Lindor. I don't think he's getting traded at this deadline. People have been making mock trades trying to will Lindor to the Yankees for like nothing. And, the Yankees just get Francisco Lindor and the Mets just get to be happy they helped the Yankees or something. No, I mean, I don't want to spend too long on this, but no, I don't care who the prospects are, whatever. Unless you're giving me Babe Ruth and Shohei Ohtani back as a guarantee in two separate players, I don't really care. You don't want to help the Yankees do anything if you're the Mets, especially you don't want to see the player of the Steve Cohen era, the first player of the Steve Cohen era that he really made a significant investment in. Your shortstop, one of your faces of the franchise, goes cross town, plays well, wins. That can't happen. That would look bad for everybody. I don't even care if even the trade makes sense for both teams. You just don't do it. You never do that to help the Yankees because that would be a colossal failure and embarrassment on the Mets' part more than anything. So I'll get your thoughts on this quick, but I think we all kind of feel the pretty much the same on this.
Yeah, this fan base needs to stop disrespecting Francisco Lindor. It's actually getting ridiculous. By the way, since everyone started giving up on him, he has an 1100 OPS in his last 11 games. He is now an above average hitter for the season. He had a couple of cold streaks. I'm not going to, lie there and ignore it. But, I mean, Francisco Lindor is still a good baseball player. I would even venture to say maybe he's a great baseball player. I think now we're seeing the guy we thought he would be this year. Unfortunately, he got injured and missed 2 months. And if you wouldn't believe it, you look at under the hood stats, his underlying metrics are kind of similar to what he's been in years past. And so we're talking about a guy who has 4 straight top 10 MVP finishes, multiple 30-30 seasons in a year where he could have been 30-30 if he didn't hurt his back. And heck, that year he finished second in MVP voting. This is a franchise player. There is no alternative to shortstop, by the way, behind him. Like we were saying about, they don't have a catcher in the farm system. They don't have another shortstop in the system until you get to the low minors. I guess Mitch Voigt, in theory, is a shortstop. But no, you're not trading Francisco Lindor. By the way, he's a no trade clause, as we've mentioned before. They're not trading him. Stop disrespecting him. He's actually a good player, despite what the haters may tell you.
I mean, we're reaching Mike Schmidt, Alex Rodriguez, Carlos Beltran level of hate with Francisco Lindor. And I get it. The whole thumbs down thing was not the greatest start to his tenure as a Met. But we're about a guy who finished second in the MVP. Guys. Yeah, it was 5 years ago. And we're talking about a guy who finished second in the MVP, led the Mets to an NLCS essentially by himself. And this franchise still can't get over the fact that he got hurt this season and didn't even have a spring training. I mean, what are we talking about? It's so flabbergasting and it's so ridiculous to even have this conversation because I don't think realize that we are talking about a top 5 player in the league, if not all. We want for what reason? What are you going to get back, Francisco Lindor? Do you want to watch Ronnie Mauricio play shortstop for the next 3 years? And that's no disrespect to Ronnie Mauricio, but we're talking about a guy who is a Gold Glover, somebody who hits home runs on the regular, somebody who's a leader, somebody who leads the clubhouse, and somebody who tries his best to actually put that Mets logo on his about it. How many guys have we had in franchise history to put a Mets logo on their chest and wear it proudly? I can think of like maybe 3 off the bat, David Wright or Flores. And I guess the other ones like Keith, but outside, I can't think of much more. So I don't know. It just seems so ridiculous to even talk about trying to chase a guy who hits 30 homers, steals 30 bases, puts up an 8 OPS every year, and averages 5 to 4. Just kick him out of town. Half got hurt times.
Yeah, no, listen, Lindor's a good player. I think people have gripes, from what they saw second half of 2024 over the last couple of years, as far as just staying on the field. There's a gripe there if you want, but listen, for the most part, when he doesn't have these kind of injuries like he's had this year, he plays every day. He's a hot and cold kind of player. We know that. Usually starts off not well, and to your point, Chris, he didn't have a spring training to begin with, so it all kind of just felt doomed from the start this year. And I think if the Mets do trade him, it will be in the offseason. That's where they get more value. If they're going to go that route, I don't think it would be at the deadline anyway. But that's neither here nor there. He ain't going to the Yankees. That's what matters the most. So we'll get that stupid idea out of here now that we're done talking about it. But real quick, we'll kind of round things off. Positive, Zach Thornton's been good. That's nice to see. I thought that was going to end maybe yesterday with the Braves coming into town, but he pitched well again. Nice little bright spot for the Met. He's got a good little cutter that he throws a lot. It's half a dozen starts now. I believe it's 6 starts that he's had. So he's been solid. It's a nice little bright spot. I think everyone probably is just waiting for the other shoe to drop at some point, just the way this season's going. But, it's a nice thing just to talk about, at least a positive for the Mets pitching, which there hasn't been a ton of this year.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, is he going to maintain this level of success? Probably not, but still, this is a guy who he's not a hard thrower, but he pounds the strike zone. I know, foreign concept there, but I mean, he really does a good job filling up the zone, which is great. And he's been really efficient in his starts. That's the other thing. He's been, going 6 innings or so, and throwing only about 80 pitches every time he takes the mound. And that's the thing. We've been watching, Freddie Peralta throw 90 pitches in 4 innings. And Zach Thornton goes out there, throws 79 pitches in 6 1/3, or something like that. And he's not facing a ton of resistance, which is great. And yesterday he could have caved. I mean, he ran into trouble in the first. He gave up a home run to Ozzie Albies, but he stayed calm, collected. And we even saw this, in his first start when he got ambushed by the Nationals. He stuck it out. He settled in, worked into the 5th inning, even though he was getting knocked around in the first. So yeah, it's encouraging to see. The Mets have had their fair share of left-handed pitching prospects who've come up and been that type of back-end starter. You got John Neese, Steven Matz, David Peterson. Now we have Zach Thornton here. If Zach Thornton could end up being like John Neese, I think we'd be perfectly fine with it. John Neese was a better pitcher than some fans may remember, because he was a solid number 5 starter who was forced to be a number 1 on some subpar teams. So I think if Zach Thornton could be a number 4 or number 5 starter on this roster going forward, perfectly fine. It's exciting to watch him though right now. Watching this young duo of him and Nolan McLean, I think it gives the fans some reason to be excited, especially with the other kids playing. Carson Bench, AJ Ewing, and with Juan Soto being injured right now. This is something to still be excited about.
No, he gives you a reason to put the TV on every game. Exactly. Every time he's out on the mound, he gives you a reason to actually tune in and watch and be excited. And to Matthias's point, yeah, is he going to have a 2.45 ERA for his entire career? No, probably not. He'll probably be a guy who gives up 3 runs over 6 or 7 innings. You look at the underlying stats and the hard hit rate's not great, but we also have seen the ability to get a ground ball to get out of trouble if he gives up a couple of hits here and there. So he's an exciting guy. He's somebody that you draft and develop, so you don't have to go out and sign a Luis Severino. So you don't have to go out and acquire a Clay Holmes, and you get that league cheap 4th and 5th starter. And that's the kind of guy that you're hoping David Stearns brings in. Now, Matthias, you actually mentioned his name a little earlier on this podcast, but I'm excited to see Jonathan Santucci. He just got moved up to AAA. He's got 120 strikeouts and 90 2/3 innings. That's a 12 K per 9. Now that's a guy who could maybe be a 3rd starter. Maybe if he tweaks some stuff, maybe even a 2, dare I say. I don't want to get ahead of myself. So yeah, all these young guys that are coming up and coming through the system, it's exciting. And Zach Thornton is one of those guys where, I'm tuning into SNY and hoping I can see a 7-inning, 8-inning performance.
Yeah, no, good point. Right, that's how teams like the Dodgers too, kind of spread the love, so to speak. You have these guys serviceable in the back end that you bring up. You're not paying a ton of money until later on. So hopefully, you can continue that. They're going to need a lot more than a 4 and a 5 starter, though. I know that much. That's, I guess, another day's problem. But we'll wrap things up real quick. Soto, calf injury again. I know he says he thinks he'll play again before the season's over. Just kind of want to get your thoughts on this quick. Not great calf injuries on a guy you paid a lot of money to. Second time this year. It would hurt a lot more if they were in a pennant race. But obviously, with the way the season's going, you don't need to really push anything for no reason. But I just want to kind of close out, get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate, really. Second IL stint. This is a guy like Lindor, super, super durable in his career. And just a sign that, this is not the Mets' year. Both guys have had, extensive IL stints. And now we're in this spot where, Soto's out again. This time it's a more significant injury. So he's probably, I don't even know when he would return. I'm wondering if it's even worth it for him to come back. It'd be nice, probably sell a couple extra tickets by having Juan Soto in the lineup. But in the meantime, I guess you can see what you have with the kids here. If you hang on to Luis Robert, you give him an extended run in the outfield. But it hurts. I know that the team's not in contention or anything, but, not having Juan Soto on the field still just, it hurts the overall vibe of the roster. But, if whether or not he's back, he's had a great year. And I think we're seeing, the Juan Soto that, earned every dollar of that contract. So maybe he just rests up and gets ready for next year. But yeah, definitely not great there.
I was excited to watch Juan Soto the whole year because I thought he could have actually won the MVP. You saw Shohei Ohtani decide not to pitch in the second half to try and save himself for October. And then you've got other guys hanging around like CJ Abrams, who might be making a bid to win an MVP. So I was excited to see maybe Soto put up a bid for the NL MVP. The Mets have never had somebody who's won the award. We've seen guys in the past who have won MVPs on last place teams. So it wasn't out of the question in that regard. So I'm a little upset in that sense that Juan Soto can't make a bid for that award. But yeah, outside of that, the Mets season is kind of buried. There's no reason to really rush him back. And there's no additional pain of, we're chasing that wild card and we can't have Soto in the lineup now with Luis Robert and Francisco Lindor. So yeah, I'm excited to see the young outfield. If Tyrone Taylor or Robert both get moved, we can maybe see Nick Morabito come back up. Maybe he can take that center field spot or left field spot. And let the youth movement start. We're 17 games under 500 on July 28th.
Exactly.
Again, though, that's the difference between this year and 2023 is there's still some players that you have hope for who can come up and prove themselves. In 2023, they were filling their rosters with a bunch of cast-offs from other teams. So yeah, there's going to be, I think there's still more reasons to be excited the last 2 months of this season than there were that year.
Yeah, still same result though. They all stink. So that'll wrap up the show. Next time we catch you, it'll be after the trade deadline. It'll be probably a new look team like we're talking about here. And when that happens, we'll break down all the new young Mets that'll probably be up making a run the last couple months of the season. So thanks for listening, everybody. And as always, let's go Mets.